We are just so honored to have these fabulous and talented costume designers with us for this lecture series, Storytelling Through Costume Design. Again, I can't tell you how excited I am, and we're excited to have you. So just a few Zoom reminders. Our session is being recorded, and a link to the recorded version will be sent to all of you within the next week. So if you miss anything, you can always go back and check it out. Also, we would love to hear from you today. So please send us your questions using the Q&A feature. We'll be watching for them, and we'll be answering as many as possible during our time together. All right, guys. So today the theme is, why is costume design an integral part of filmmaking? How do the costumes contribute to the narrative of film and TV? Storytelling through costume design. Costume design is an integral part of filmmaking, and as well as it is with writing, set design, and direction. A costume designer must know the story and become intimately acquainted with the characters, their backgrounds, emotions, and what drives them. After meticulous research, they put their vision together with drawings, inspiration, and swatches, and present it to the director, scriptwriter, and often the actors. Their ultimate goal is to take the audience on a compelling, emotional journey through texture, style, silhouette, and color that plays its true part in perfect storytelling. Join us as we discuss the idea of storytelling through costume design with FIDM alumni and world-renowned costume designers Trish Summerville, Jill Ohanneson, and Mandi Line. Let's start off with introductions. Trish Summerville, costume designer and FIDM alumni. Trish Summerville is best known for her work on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Hunger Games Catching Fire, Gone Girl, and Red Sparrow. Summerville has been recognized by her peers at the Costume Design Guild Awards by being nominated on 3 separate occasions for her films and winning 2 times for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Catching Fire. In television, Summerville has designed the pilot for Westworld and was nominated for an Emmy and CDG Award for such work. In addition, Summerville designed the pilot for Ray Donovan and the first season of C for Apple TV+, starring Jason Momoa. Summerville recently wrapped Netflix's Mank, a biopic starring Gary Oldman, on screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz, who collaborated with the one and only Orson Welles on Citizen Kane. Next, we've got Jill Ohanneson. Costume designer and FIDM alumni Jill Ohanneson has numerous film and television credits, including Premonition, 40 Days and 40 Nights, Whatever Happened to Bobby Long, Instinct, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, The Replacements, Lost Souls, Mouse Hunt, Indian Runner, The Crossing Guard, and The Pledge. Her TV credits include Dexter, Lie to Me, Swingtown, Trauma, The Event, and the last 3 seasons of 6 Feet Under, for which Ohanneson won a Costume Designers Guild Award for Outstanding Costumes in a Contemporary Series. Ohanneson also garnered 2 Costume Designers Guild nominations for Outstanding Costume Design in a Contemporary Series for the first 2 of the 4 seasons of ABC's Revenge. Most recently, Ohanneson was the costume designer for the Apple TV Plus show For All Mankind. And finally, we've got Mandi Line. FIDM alumni, Mandi Line is one of the most influential, inspirational, and sought-after costume designers today, with a variety of credits in features and TV shows to commercials and music videos. Her work on ABC's Pretty Little Liars has made her a force in fashion. She's also worked on Faking It for MTV, Shameless on Showtime, the pilot of Unreal for Lifetime, and designing Travelers for Netflix, and the arrangement on the E! Network, Charmed for the CW, and most recently, BH 90210. About to start a feature when the pandemic hit, Mandi's passion has moved towards hosting her own Insta Live hashtag Behind the Scenes, interviewing fellow costume designers, and working with Making the Cut on Amazon. Everyone, please help me welcome the fabulous Mandi Line, Trish Summerville, and Jill Ohanneson.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So honored to have the three of you. This is a costume designer's dream. So thank you, thank you, thank you for taking a part of storytelling through costume design. We're so honored to have all three of you. First and foremost, how are all of you doing?
We're grateful for this.
Very happy.
Okay, Trish, Jill, yes, how are you all doing? Especially, you know, we always ask, because of the pandemic, because of the situation, you know, so much, especially with TV, film production was shut down, and everybody's had to sort of reconfigure their life, really. So, you know, just, you know, let us know you know, how's it been going?
Well, I started the show. So I started my Insta Lives because I felt I needed a connection to other costume designers, and I'm on guest 21, and I'm gonna wrap up probably by the end of June, but I have a guest tomorrow, so I started my own Insta Live show, and that's been keeping me really busy and really connected. So I'm super grateful for my fellow community. I mean, they inspire me every day doing that. So
great. Trish, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I was lucky enough to be on a show. I was on Mank, and we finished just in the beginning of March before all the lockdown.
Wow.
So we just timed it out really well, and we got our reshoots and everything done before the pandemic started. So I had already planned to have 2 months off before I started another show. So it felt fine. And it was nice to actually be home and have some time off outside of everything else that was happening.
Right. Great. And Jill, tell us about your experience.
Well, I've really been enjoying my time off. I've worked straight for two and a half years, including being out of the country in Australia and New Orleans. And so I'm very, very happy to just get to have some time to kind of relax, recharge, and hang out with my dogs.
Nice. Well, thank you. We're glad that you're all staying safe and that you all look well, very well.
The waist up.
Yeah, very stylish. I know this gives us an excuse to dress up, you know, now that we can't, you know, go out per se, it's like all of a sudden we can dress up. Another sort of sad note is I get to put on jackets that I hadn't worn in like 2 months, and all of a sudden I'm like, why doesn't it fit?
I said this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Grubhub. Oh. All right, so let's get back to costume design. Let's start out a general question that I want all of you guys to answer. Why do you think that costume design is so integral and such an integral part of filmmaking? Let's start out with Trish.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like I love being part of filmmaking, and I do TV and film. And I think what's integral about it is, I mean, I know the joy I feel is doing all the research. I love being part of a team. I love storytelling. And so for me, it starts off in the research with the script and doing a little breakdown of the script and trying to wrap my head around who the characters are. And we all kind of conjure in our head when we read something, who a character is or what they look like and what they feel like. And, you know, so I like doing all of that, and I like helping the actors kind of transition and turn into this character. And I like actors who are really open to that and want to constantly look different and challenge themselves. So, I mean, I'm sure I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure the other ladies on the panel also, I know a great feeling is when you're in a fitting and, you know, an actor puts on the costume and you see them physically start to change, or you feel adjustments that they're making. So I think, you know, being a costume designer, it's integral to filmmaking because we are part of the story where we have to fit into where the characters live, what their daily lifestyle is like, economically, what makes sense as to what they can wear and have. So it's not so much that it's fashion, but it's more function and physicality of who the characters are.
All right, Jill, you're next. What can you add to that?
That was very comprehensive, Trish. You know, basically, I totally agree with almost everything that Trish said. And the way that I help an actor get into the character is by how the clothes fit how they're tailored, and the use of color, pattern, and texture to help set the mood. You know, when people look at a certain color or see a pattern versus a solid piece of fabric, you know, the response is different. And I think that when the actor is in those clothes, they, as Trish said, you know, really kind of step into the clothes and step into the character. And that is part of the storytelling. I believe we are all character designers, and so it's important to find out where they've come from. You know, where are they now and where do they need to go in the story, the script, and to make sure that what I'm doing is also interfacing with what the production designer is doing and the set decorator is doing, so that we're all telling the same story. And basically, our job is to help actualize the writer, director, and producer's vision for this project, whatever it is.
Nice, nice. All right, Mandi, how can you sum it up? Why is costume design an integral part of filmmaking?
Well, I think all that is left is a period and a mic drop. I don't have anything left to say, because just so you know, all you future students out there, those two women speaking, do people use pens anymore? Write this stuff down, record this, because what they just said is so important. The only thing I have to add to this is I always tell my coworkers, we as designers and the clothes on them, we have minutes to tell a story. Why is this necklace on? Why is that earring there? I mean, girl with the dragon tattoo, let me show you my obsession. I have a tattoo of her. I literally was obsessed with that show. Those clothes on that show, that jacket told a story. She's not, she doesn't think about fashion. She puts that jacket on and that's who she is internally. And that jacket alone told a story for the original and the remake. And examples like that are so important. We have minutes to have a jacket tell a story. That's how important our job is.
Wow, wonderfully said. You know, I know that I've read a lot of articles and a lot of interviews that costume designers have said, and it seems to be a very current refrain that they always say is that there are so many times when they're doing the fittings and the actor puts on the costume, and by that it could be a t-shirt, it could be a pair of jeans, but you know, and all of a sudden it helps them become that character. And it's so transformative for them. And I think what I always like to say is that, you know, I like to tell people that sometimes if you don't notice the costumes in a TV or in a film, the costume designer has done their job.
Yeah.
In that I mean, I don't know, do you ladies agree? I just feel that to me, it's like, it just becomes like natural. I know that at times, that costumes should shout, and you know, but at times when it's like, oh, you don't even question that that's a secretary or that is a cosmonaut, Jill, you know, or you know, whoever it could be, then that's because it was done so beautifully, perfectly, and natural. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that's part of the goal. I mean, unless it's scripted that there's a particular garment or piece that should stand out or that is part of a highlight in the storytelling. I mean, I always want my costumes to be part of the story, that it doesn't pull you out. It's not distracting, you know? And so I think that goes back to, like, as well as what Jill was saying about knowing where to use pattern and where to use color and how that tells the story in different scenes. I mean, you can do that, you know, in various ways, but yeah, I mean, I feel strongly about, I want to be a part of the whole story, unless specifically the costume is supposed to stand out for a particular reason. It's whether it's to make a grand entrance or it's, you know, a coat that's passed down, or, you know, if it has a purpose, then yes. But if not, yeah, it should be a whole overall beautiful view, and you're listening to dialogue and watching what's happening and not distracted by a garment.
Right, right. So now I want to ask all of you, when approaching a new project, what sort of research, I know some of you have touched a little bit upon this, but to tell our audience what sort of research is involved. I don't think that people realize, you know, I think that there's still people out there that think, oh, you're just styling, or you're just putting on clothes to people. I know, stop it, Jill, stop it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, stop it, Mandy, stop it, Trish. But you know what I'm saying. So I think, just to sort of explain to the audience, I mean, maybe our audience is already, they know, what kind of research is involved, how much collaboration is between the directors, the producers, and the actors that you have with them. So we'll start with Jill, since she just laughed a little bit about this.
Well, I feel really strongly about the research portion of preparing for a film or a television project, because that is basically going to help you set up your foundation upon which all of your costumes and all of your storytelling is built. And so, I think we're incredibly lucky, because there is now, due to the internet and computers, so much more available to us online versus before. When I started early on, I know people were like, okay, well, I'm going to go to this museum in Hamburg because they have this particular collection and I need to see these dresses. So we're so incredibly blessed. And even for a contemporary film where, as you say, the clothes need to kind of be seamless, you still need to get a feeling of the difference, for instance, between, what an inner city would look like in New York versus San Francisco versus Los Angeles. So you need to do your research, not only based on the characters, but where the areas that they're living and what is going on in politics, culture, fashion, architecture in that particular area and around the period of your project.
Mandy, in like some of the contemporary shows, like for example, 90210 and Pretty Little Liars, what kind of talk about that there's still research in that.
Well, I think what's interesting in doing my live shows, I've really spoken to such a diverse community, and more than ever in television film, we're hoping to see a broader spectrum of diverse actors, diverse, cast, crew. So that research, I am, white woman that lives in Glendale. My research is, could you tell? My research, I call friends, I go online, it's being in the moment too. I love to saturate myself with, it's more discussions right now, and I'm trying to get involved in a lot of discussions and diverse webinars and panels, because I want to be able to connect with those. The next time I get that modern contemporary television show, I want to show a voice of all different types of people. And I think it's, it's through the internet, it's through conversation, it's through meeting, it's through interacting. It's not like I'm looking up historical times. But for me personally, I love that one-on-one interaction. I want the legit story.
And great, thank you. Trish, in terms of the collaborative work, talk about how a costume designer does, it's part of the process to collaborate with the writer, the director, the producer, and that it's all a collaborative work. I remember my partner, David, when he did his master's in costume design, he said that not only were the students of costume design in the class, they also had like students that were that wanted to be writers or directors or producers. And of course, a lot of them were like, why are we here trying to learn about costumes? Well, it's because, of course, they were setting up the foundation, right? Of like, yeah, when you get to the real world, y'all gonna have to work together.
Yeah, I go back to I think that's a big reason why I love filmmaking and TV. It's I love being part of a community of people that are all working, kind of for the same goal. It's that sense of community and a sense of a family. I joke that, we're all kind of a bit of like gypsies or carnies, because your show takes you where your show is going to take you. And you might sign up early on, and then all of a sudden your location changes and you don't know where you're going for however many months. But I think with the collaboration, I'm lucky to have done repeat work with a couple, directors. So you find your comfort there. But I think it is the thing, again, going back down to the script and having a lot of dialogue with the director and the writer about who these characters are and what they see. And then you can have something in your mind, because we start on early a lot of times before casting even happens. So you're coming up with, you're coming up with ideas and design, and now becomes a female, you change that up, or it could be someone, you know, that comes in that's a complete age than what you had in your mind. So I think having lots of dialogue and having a viewpoint of where the director sees, and then also looking at their, can I just get a medium shot? Because it's like, you know, he likes the tight and then a wide shot, and I'm like, who knew I didn't have to buy shoes, you know?
Right.
So yeah, so I think it's those kind of conversations. And then I also work really closely with the production designer and the DP, because again, the environment plays a really big role as to where these characters live, where they're working, what they come from, again, what their background and heritage is like. And then with the DP, you also want to know what lighting is like. And going back again to Jill to bring up, it's like, what patterns are going to look great? What colors are going to look great? And that goes to production design as well. You know, do you want the person sitting on the couch in the exact same color as the couch? Or do you want to offset that with a different color in the room? So, you know, I think it's constant dialogue, and you have to be able to, you know, have really strong convictions, but be able to go with the flow a lot, because things, all know things change and they change quickly.
There's a lot, as I'm watching, there's a lot of amen, sister.
Oh, we're giving her a high five.
Happening here.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to some specific questions. And I'm going to start out with Jill and talk about For All Mankind on Apple TV+. Now, the series, which I love, it depicts an alternate history. Let's just tell people maybe that may not know, of a world that would have happened if the global space race had never ended. And that what if the Soviet Union landed a man on the moon before the US? Ooh. And a Soviet cosmonaut, he lands on the moon first, and this devastates the morale at NASA, right? But pushes them to catch up. All right, Jill, correct. I gave a little synopsis of your show. Now we know it's a period piece, so it takes you through the late 60s and 70s. How much research goes into creating something like, for example, the NASA spacesuit and those classic NASA coveralls, and how much creative liberty can you take when working on something like this? For example, there are photos. So does that come into play? And then maybe can you add a little bit of your own Jill Ohanneson costume liberty?
Well, you know, that always depends on the director, writer, and producers. You know, it really depends on how do they want to ground the project. And in this particular instance, since we were having an alternate reality of what happens in history, they really wanted the clothes to be what they actually would have been. And they also wanted, particularly for NASA, to be as exact as possible. So particularly the coveralls were not available anywhere. So we had those all made and from scratch, you know, found fabric, found all the findings and everything. And then also, I think in one of the pictures, there are women in the suits who didn't exist at that point. So we not only made coveralls for them, but we also had to make all of the harnesses that they wear when they're training in airplanes and being able to, you know, evacuate. So that was really important, that all looked, you know, exact as possible. Right. And also with the military. As far as the actual costumes go, again, they wanted, it was very important to our showrunner, Ron Moore, that we really convey the feeling of Houston during the late 60s and early 70s. Not New York, you know, not high fashion New York, not right. Organic Los Angeles, but Houston, Middle America. So, you know, I really started with Sears catalogs, JCPenney, Montgomery Wards, and looked for a lot of online newspaper visuals and magazines. And what was really interesting is that there wasn't as much color photography in the mid to late 60s. And so that's why I particularly ended up with the catalogs, the, you know, JCPenney's and Sears, because those were in color, and it was so helpful to really set what the color palette was going to be. And we really chose to have a cooler color palette at NASA, you know, kind of very sleek and cold and you know, all kind of cold tones, and have a warmer, more intimate color palette for the astronauts and their families at home. At home. Yes.
Nice. Now talk about, I know, for example, Karen, she is always so perfect.
Absolutely.
And prim and proper and it's all the P's, and pressed.
Yes.
Why?
You know, she is the typical kind of woman of the you know, 50s going into the 60s, where it was all about being, as you say, proper, being very feminine. She is the woman who is at home. She is the woman behind the man who is, you know, going out and being an astronaut. And so it's really important for her to always present herself in the best possible way, because she is a reflection on her husband. And so in that world, you know, it was always about what you look like to the outside world. And so she made sure that she was perfect at all times. And that also helped to define part of what her personality was like, is that she was just, it was really important for her that everything be perfect. And she was a little bit kind of, you know, manic in that way. And
yeah.
So the way, you know, everything was pressed and very crisp was really helpful for that. You know, and always earrings, always, you know, the perfect apron, the perfect shoes, versus, you know, some of the other characters who are a little more relaxed.
It's great, because as somebody watching it, it instantly tells you who she is.
Correct.
You know, it makes, at least for me, I judge her, and that is the point. Like I'm already I already know who this woman is. You know, she is that perfect housewife, that, you know, it's like there could be a fire in the front lawn, but she ain't never gonna let you know.
No.
You know, it's always perfection.
Exactly. She is a perfectionist who is trying to stay in control at all times.
Right. And her outfits show, the costumes show. Thank you so much, Jill. Now let's talk to Trish, who is also costuming a show on Apple TV Plus. And this is another great show, C, starring Jason Momoa and Alfre Woodard. It's science fiction, dystopian future. It takes place 400 years in the future. Now get this, the human race has lost its sense of sight, and society is left to find new ways to interact, build, hunt, and survive. There's different tribes. You've got Jason Momoa, Baba Voss, right? And then he marries a woman who is pregnant, and then she bears the children, twins, who, what? They can see. Oh my goodness. All right, Trish, now we know this is set in the dystopian future, but it appears the costumes are primitive. You know, it almost seems like you went like 400 years to the past, perhaps. You know, we see the fur, the leather, a lot of tribal elements. What inspired you to take this sort of dystopian future show in that direction?
Well, again, it's going back to your earlier question about collaboration with the director and the writer. So the writer and the person who came up with the idea is Stephen Knight. And Francis Lentz directed the episodes. So you can take from the story where it is Stephen, there's not a lot of humanity left on the planet. So then, you know, the flora and fauna have come back and are really flourished. And so everyone's kind of living off the land and have passed down traits like, you know, that we still do. So it's, I kind of took the idea of going back from where we are now, going back 400 to 500 years and seeing what was the mainstay that we still had. And then moving that forward of what we could still have in 400 to 500 years. And yeah, and there's different tribes, like part of it, like Baba's tribe, who's the Alkene, live in the high mountain range. So they're in a lot of furs, a lot of leather, and they live mainly in exterior and use all the natural things around them. So it was talking to the writers and the production designer of like, what animals can I see so I can see where we get clothes? What kind of crops do they have so I can see where everything's where, what do you have so I can see where I can get clothing so that it makes some sort of sense. And then it was also, we had a big discussion and I had a massive chart. It was just Francis that were on the show. We were kind of the only two of the producers that started. So we made these charts of how long do certain things take to degrade. And so shockingly, there's stuff that, you know, is around 150, 200 years of what they can tell us so far. So like we use tires in building some of the homes and use tires on the bottom of the shoes.
Wow.
So that would stay around. And like plastics, sadly, we should all be mindful of the plastics because the plastics stay around. Mm-hmm. And in the script, they call the plastics the smooth that never rots, you know, and then they call metals God bones. So we tried to integrate certain things like that and then have each grouping look different. Like with Jason's tribe, it's very naturalistic and neutral tones and colors. And then in the Queen's community and in her kingdom, we were able to make it a bit more elaborate, like that she had pieces that were handed down through many centuries through her family. And like you'll see, we have these crowns we've made for her, but they're kind of broken and then repaired. And she has a beautiful long coat that is stitched over and over and over because it's degrading and falling apart. Wow. But it's this heirloom. So I was really lucky to have an amazing team of people. We shot in Vancouver, mainly on Vancouver Island and off, and we shot almost all exteriors. So all the snow and the rain you see is really happening. But yeah, I mean, it was really, I mean, to me, it was such a creatively fulfilling project because I got to make clothing out of telephone wire and out of literally nuts and bolts. And we would go to scrap yards and find things there and then bring them back and make clothing out of it. So yeah, so it was a really fulfilling project, but it was interesting and great because it was something where it is sci-fi, but it goes really back down to basics and goes back to very primitive times. And I pulled in a lot of different cultures to kind of be inspired by, like Native American, First Nations, African tribes like the Himba tribes and stuff, to use just different types of design and detail.
I think that's wonderful, you know, especially when you're doing something that is sci-fi, that is fantasy, you sort of have that freedom to sort of, well, we don't know what it is, so we can create it. And so maybe I'll go backwards or I'll go future. So like, it doesn't always have to be something that looks like a Pierre Cardin space age suit, right. You know? Yeah. So
and
I
also
love that. Now,
very functional.
Did I read this correctly that were you supposed to film in the summer and then it changed? Is that right? And so then how much time did you have to be like, we got to make some fur?
Yeah, I mean, some of the original scripts had a lot of, and there's naked people roaming around, and there's naked people roaming around. And, you know, I mean, naked doesn't really work in the wintertime. So once we knew we were making the shift to go to Vancouver, and we didn't start shooting until September. Originally, we were supposed to shoot in like July. So it was doing a lot of layers, and then it took us through the winter. And there's actually, if you're watching the series, which I hope everyone's watching this series, there's a scene on one of the episodes where they're on a raft. They built this raft out of big logs, and it's maybe 30 degrees out. And at that point we had already designed all the costumes and had shot several episodes, and they're on a journey. So they're in the same costumes. There's nowhere for them to get more clothing, and they're on this raft, and then they decide they're going to go in the water. So at that point is when you're like, well, how are we going to do that? Because the water is, I mean, it's like hypothermia cold.
Freezing,
so
yeah.
We had to then devise and put, and you have Jason who's getting in the water, you know, and then there's his stunt double who's getting in the water, and then all the soldiers are getting in the water. So then we already had these existing costumes that fit a certain way, and then we had to try and put dry suits underneath, which if you're not familiar with a dry suit, it keeps all the water out. So you have thermals underneath, then a dry suit, which has a massive rubber sealant around the neck. Oh. And you're trying to disguise that. So there's those kind of challenges when all of a sudden there's going to be a change, you know. So.
Wow. You have to be ready for it. That is part of the job as a
costume
designer. All right, Mandi, I'm such a big fan of yours. And we know that, you know, it seems like you've been doing mainly TV for the last 10 years. And I'd love to know, was there a moment that really got you in the door to television work? I hear you may have a somewhat of a cool story.
Oh gosh, when I was at FIDM, when I graduated, I was interning, I was doing everything I could to get my foot in the door. I used the job placement program at FIDM, everybody.
Hey!
There's cool. Anyways, I was interning, working on low budget films, loving every minute of it. My boyfriend at the time said, hey, we got to dress this band. Their name is Korn. I was like, nice name. Like, who's heard of Korn? So then I started dressing musicians, kind of a similar background to Trish. We were doing musicians at the same time. And then I get another call from that same ex-boyfriend saying, there's these 5 dudes from Calabasas. They've got this band called Linkin Park. I'm like, I've never heard of them. Oh, they're going to be huge. So that was my beginning, but something really interesting. And I always tell this to students or people coming up. You never know when you're going to make that impression on a director, on a producer, no matter what position you're in. I was at the dentist. This is so interesting. I was at the dentist and this guy looked at me and he said, aren't you the assistant on this TV show? And I said, yeah, I actually had to leave to take care of my mother, blah, blah, blah. And he said, great. I was the director on that show. I've got a designer that really needs someone to kind of, heighten up this TV show that I have. I would like you to interview for. Cut to, I went to the producer's house. I opened my book, no websites, nothing back then. And she had 2 teenagers who were like 15 and 16. They saw Linkin Park. They saw Korn, System of a Down. You could see them like pressing their mom.
Yeah.
Oh my God, cool. Anyways, cut to.
They're like, she's cool. She's cool.
And moms are just like, okay, if my kids said they're cool, So I get a call that night and she said, I'm really sorry, Mandi. And I had never designed any television before. I had dreadlocks and tattoos and, that was too much. And she said, we're sorry, but we can't have you assistant design the show. And I was just, oh my God, it was during Christmas time. And she said, we would like this to be your first television design show. We would like you to take over the show.
Whoa.
It wasn't any bad blood. She did something else. It was perfect time. So Greek, a college show about fraternities and sororities, was my first TV show. Like super random. But what I did with that show was, not to get into it, but I made sure that they trusted me enough that it wasn't just average t-shirt, sweats, and jeans. And that's kind of where I got my trademark of, heightened reality. And I went with it. And it was on for 6 seasons. And that was my beginning. You never know who you could.
You never know. Listen out there. So make sure to not cancel your dentist appointment.
That's why I got the gold tooth. All right.
So talk about PLL, Pretty Little Liars, and heightened reality. How do you feel their looks told a story, and why do you think the show was such a big hit? And also the costumes. I mean, this is contemporary fashion, but it's so funny. You do a Google search, Pretty Little Liars, and literally the second thing that comes up is Pretty Little Liars costumes, Halloween costumes. So they become like iconic. Your costumes, your costume design work has become iconic, that now it's gone into the parlance of Halloween.
I think it's actually become vintage now. Someone said 10-year anniversary. I was like, oh my God, is this? No. Well, you were asking how, it connects to the story. And my answer is, I didn't care about the story. No, I did. I just wanted them to look cool. At the interview, I'll never forget, I turned down the show. I turned down the pilot. I said, I don't want to do a kid's show anymore. I ended up coming back, watching the pilot, interviewing. And what I told them, I said, Gossip Girl is ending. It's on its last season. There is no other show that you can create identities in high school where kids want to dress, they aspire to dress like them.
Right.
And the producer, I came in the second episode, and it was this rain scene, and Aria was running to the love of her life, which happens to be her history teacher. That's weird. And I didn't have any of the budget yet. I had no money. I had no time to shop. I just had inventory. I cut, I sewed, I turned things inside out. And like they were saying, Trish and Jill, you never know what to expect. And the DP said, oh, it's raining in the scene. I was just like, oh my God. So, you know, I shoved actually a raincoat underneath the jacket on the outside. But I ended up creating this girl that made her own clothes, who was an artist, who was edgy. She had 3 belts on. She had a feathered earring. And the creator, Marlene King, came up to me and she said, that is Aria.
Yeah, that's it. That's her.
From that point on, I got to create the personalities, you know, the conservative rich one, the one girl that was coming out. Nobody knew she was gay in high school. And I really got to embrace that story. And now stories have elevated since, you know, that was so iconic back then. You know, now those stories are not, I think we want a little more grit now, a little more edge to our stories. But back then, that pretty little life was aspirational and, you know, really changed my life. And they call that show Lightning in a Bottle. Twitter had just come out. We didn't even know what Twitter was. It was 4 girls. I mean, by the end, there was like 20 girls and a twin sister who was, I mean, it was crazy. But for you saying why was it so successful, I think it was the right timing. It was a book series, Twitter, engagement, you know, and I think those 4 girls really saw the power of that show and ran with it. I ran with it too. Like I went to interviews, I met Joan Rivers, like it was a moment. It was a moment, and we didn't have all these streaming services and all, you know, it was still an isolated TV watching experience.
I think it was part of the zeitgeist. It was in the water. It was perfect for that time. Yeah, for sure. All right, let's ask a couple more questions to all of you. Jill, what do you think makes a great costume designer? What's your take on that?
I feel like a great costume designer is somebody who knows how to interact with the producers, the director, the writer, you know, work with the actors and take all of that information and use that to create the character through the clothes that they're wearing. And, you know, sometimes the director or writers are very clear about what they want. And sometimes, you know, they'll let me do some work with the actors so that the actors get to have a, you know, a collaborative part in it. And it's just really about being able to be a good manager of your department, know how to deal with politics, which there always are, whether it's television or TV. There are many, many cooks, and also the rest of your crew, you know, working with the DP, collaborating with the production designer and the set decorator. You know, I am part of a whole, and so my job is to make sure that I am doing all of my job to help everybody else be able to do their job.
Great, thank you. Trish, what do you think, if somebody wanted to pursue a career as a costume designer, how would you recommend they go about it?
Well, I mean, being a FIDM alumni, I think that really helped me a lot. I mean, when I was at FIDM, I didn't even realize that this was a job or an opportunity. And I did start off with doing musicians' clothing and tours and music videos. And that's how I met Francis Lawrence, the director that I work with. We did several music videos together. But I think the thing is, I mean, for everyone, whether you're choosing to go the school route or not, I think to be a really good costume designer and work in the costume department in general, have as many skills as you can have. And then as you're going along, you'll figure out what really speaks to you, but learn to sew. You know, I definitely know how to sew. I can drape, I can make patterns. I can't make production patterns, but I can make patterns. I definitely do a lot more draping. I think get to a point where you can illustrate, where you can convey your thoughts. You don't have to be an amazing illustrator, because as we know, that's a big thing in our business, that we all hire illustrators or concept artists or whatever it is to do presentations with. But I think you know, I think it's have as many pluses in your hand as you can. You know, do massive amounts of research, study periods, study fabrications, study fabrics, study stitching. I mean, there's so much knowledge that you can acquire. So I think to be a really good costume designer, gather all the knowledge that you can, so that when you are offered that job and you get your foot in, and if it's as a PA, you know, you can also really observe and learn, and then you get in as a costumer, and then you can show like, oh, I can actually help out with this, and I know this, and I can do research on period because I'm really familiar with this. So I think it's just having as many tools as you can to get started, and that's a great way to represent yourself to people and show that you're very committed.
Great. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Now it's time for the Q&A. Are you guys ready?
Ready?
All right, we're gonna start. Let's see. Let's start with Trish, since you were just right here. We have a question for Miss Summerville. What was your favorite part of designing the costumes? Of course, for the Hunger Game movie.
What was my favorite part? Wow, it was, I mean, there's so much of it. I mean, definitely, you know, all the leads were really great. It was great because we got to have, I had a variety of so many people, you know, like from Effie Trinket to, of course, Katniss Everdeen. I'm a big advocate of trying to work with designers and then local people and local new talent. So that was also great, seeing some people who'd never built anything for film before, that I had built things and they got to see it on a big screen. But I have to say, like, the big scenes were really great, like the party scenes, and figuring out how I was, again, like in most things that I do, I kind of approach it in kind of communities and tribes. So I try and represent everyone. So we even did that with the party scenes or in the districts, you know, and since there was a movie prior to me doing Catching Fire, it was figuring out where we could make that massive shift. And since the story changed so much, that was easier. And we really wanted to heighten the fashion part of it and really bring in a lot more kind of extreme pieces and really individual pieces. So I can't pick really one thing. I mean, overall, it was really exciting. It was really, really, really hard because we had big scenes, and we started off, I think our first day of shooting was either the chariot parade day. So that was 500 background plus all the guards and all the kids. So yeah, so it was a big day, but yeah, it was really interesting and fulfilling because we got to go extreme fashion.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was great. It was lots of visual eye candy for sure.
Yeah,
now, Mandi,
it's more color I've ever used in my life, all in one project.
Wow. Okay, we have a question, and I'll do it for Mandi. Now the question says, let's see, how do you work with very low budget projects while still designing great costumes? And I always hear this from costume designers, some of the top, you think they get $1 million to do costumes, and they always say, oh no, honey, we had a low budget. So Mandi, talk about that.
Well, if you're my friend during a low budget film, don't let me at your house, because I will be leaving with a bag of your stuff. I'm not kidding. One of my first features, I'm dead serious. I remember my partner at the time was watching and said, is that I said, yes, that is your jacket. I think, and there's still so many great projects out there right now that have a good script, a good cast, but they don't have money. And honestly, I think it's obviously being resourceful. I think it's, and these women can tell you too, it's reputations that have been built because of good attitudes and good working environments that you get to call up people that can hook you up, that doesn't come right off the bat. But I think it's, again, like Trish was saying, when you get your skill set, you have knowledge of what stores have this, what store, I think it's gathering all that information, and also working with the directors and producers and being very realistic with your budget, with another skill set. I can give you this for 5,000, but for 1,000, we might have to make this change last a couple more days. And, I think with my background, low budget features is where I came from. And I think most of what I know and what I do and how I dye and how I, use fabric is because having to beg, borrow, steal,
Yeah.
and, you know, and really make something from nothing. And I bet these women can tell you some of our favorite projects come when they made that last switch and your money is kind of already gone and you wing it and you make it happen and put heart into it. And it comes out to be one of your favorite, you know, some of your favorite work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, Jill, I want to know, was there any television show or a movie that made you say, you know what, I want to be a costume designer? I think that's a question that's being asked. Was there anything that influenced you in TV or film that made you say, you know, that's where I want to go?
I love that you asked that question, because when I was a little girl on Saturdays, I would get my father's complete attention and we would watch Mae West and Fred Astaire and Ginger Roger movies. So particularly with the Fred Astaire and Ginger Roger movies, you know, that was all about kind of 30s glamour and gowns and, you know, dresses that flowed and moved while they danced. And I just was entranced and was like, oh my God, forget princesses, I just wanted, you know, I just wanted those ball gowns and feather boas and things. And so those were some of my earliest things. And then when I too realized after having gone to FIDM that you could have a career doing that kind of work, I did student films for free for a year, and I, you know, did anything that I could volunteer for. And I really started working for free on the weekends with AFI, American Film Institute workshops on the weekend, and working with their directors and producers on student projects. And so I can trace it all from word of mouth back from there. And, you know, I've always loved films that I can tell who the character is by what they're wearing. And I was really inspired by that. And sometimes they're very aspirational, sometimes they're glamorous, and sometimes the clothes are very, very quiet. And I love all parts of that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. It's so, you know, we grew up in this age where I totally understand that watching the old movies. Like I remember waking up in the morning and watching those old movies as well. It's, you know, we hope that the younger generation can get into that, because nowadays they're not watching that much TV, and they've got the phone, the internet, and it's like, I know in terms of our creative field and
right.
designing, whether it's especially for costume design, but for fashion, it's like that you know, especially the old Hollywood films, the movies, it made such an impression, I think, on all of us, that hopefully we can get some you know, the younger generation to go back and look at that and get inspired the way that we have gotten inspired, I guess I can just say.
It becomes a reference point too, you know?
Right.
Yeah. You know, and
right.
Especially for a little girl who grew up on a farm, to see those fantasies on television, even if they're in black and white, was, you know, you never thought that you could be part of that world, or helping to create that world, or helping to tell that story. And so the fact that I get to do that now is, you know, I feel like I have the best job in the world, truly.
And note to the audience, especially there's the younger audience, you know, there are going to be times where these fabulous costume designers, like in terms of referencing, they're going to reference. So if they turn to you and you're their assistant and say, you know, something like Mae West, something like Ginger Rogers, you best just pretend you know what they are talking about, right? Right, ladies?
I'm working
and then look it up.
Yeah, I'm working with this intern right now, Colin. I think on the daily, I'm like, you haven't seen that? You never heard? You haven't seen? And he's like, oh my gosh, I have this list. Okay, fine.
No, that's great. Trish, so we have a question saying, can I get into costume design even though I am studying illustration, or would I need to switch majors to fiber or fashion designer? What do you think?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the other question. I mean, I think definitely having illustration under your belt is great. And this is a conversation I have with any illustrator that I work with. there's a lot of times as costume designers, we use illustrations that illustrators will do on a computer. I love things that look like, you know, look like pencil, look like real drawings and stuff, but we use a lot of stuff that's done on a computer. So I'm not a big fan of like anything that's like a mashup. But so I think with being an illustrator, just know in your head that you have to learn construction. Because one of the conversations I do have with illustrators is when I'm explaining how I want something drawn, or I draw a really quick flat of something and then they draw it on a body for me, it is like, well, where are the darts? How's it going to curve? I need something here. And I even had a joke with some of the guys that I work with that do a lot of superhero stuff. I'm like, how am I getting into that? Am I pouring the person through the neck hole? Like where there's no openings, there's like, you know, there's no seams anywhere. So I think illustration is definitely a big plus, because I think if you keep in mind, a great way if she or he's doing illustrations now is get garments out of your closet and draw those things. And so that you can see what, you know, how is a sleeve set in? How's a collar made? And so that you have really good references of what a construction of a garment is. And then also be able to do beautiful illustrations that help sell it to the producers and the directors, because generally most of them don't understand construction at all either. And so those things are really useful for presentations or to show actors for presentations. But really also you really have to know construction of a garment. So yeah, I think definitely if you're in illustration, you can, I think anybody, if you're committed to any kind of a career, you can make a shift. And that's what I was saying earlier, like try it all out and then you'll figure out what fits for you, what calls you and what you feel passionate about. Because in our industry, there's many positions that we desperately need. Like, I mean, I'm speaking, you know, for several friends and colleagues that I work with. I would love if we had more cobblers. I would love if we had more milliners. I'd love if we had more craftspeople that did dyeing. I'd love if we had more supervisors. There's a job that we really need. And you have to be a very intelligent, very organized person to do supervising, but you also need to know all of the costume design aspects and be able to run a team. So in our business, besides being the costume designer, we need a massive, really committed, really talented group of people that make everything happen. We don't do any of it on our own. It takes such a good team to make it happen.
Well said. All right, next, Mandi, we have a question for you. It's specific to you. What is the most influential piece you have made, and how did that piece impact or express the story you were helping to write? Is there anything you can think of? This is from Diamond Pen.
Is your first name Diamond? Because if so, hang out. That is amazing. I wanted to jump off of something really quick that Trish said, that position supervisor. When we come across somebody that we work with and we know they have like potential to be a supervisor, I always say, do you realize you will always work because you're, you know, they have that skill set? And they're like, but I want to be a designer. I was like, oh, I'm just letting you know, there are so many that are needed. My gosh. A piece that was so influential. Oh gosh. I mean, I guess I could talk about, you know, a lot of my questions and things I get interviewed still go back to Pretty Little Liars, even though I've been off that show for so long. But you have like a new group of people, you know, a new age range watching that. There was this feathered earring, and it sounds like, oh, big deal. But what was interesting was it was in my ear, and the actress was on camera. She barely knew me. I think I was there for 2 days. And I took this feathered earring out of my ear that I bought in Los Feliz, like right off of Vermont, the store that's not even there. Unamaze, the store. I know
Unamaze.
So cute. And I took it and I literally didn't even clean it, nothing. I put it from my ear to her ear, and she looks at me and she was like, that was kind of gross. And I was like, trust me, it's dope. I had the producer come up to me and she said, I think that earring's a little bit much. And I said, you've got to trust me on this. I swear it's not. Cut to, I got a stack of Entertainment Weekly. Literally, you open up the middle and it said, feathered earring trend, and it's got her photo. And so every time I think on something like, we think those heels are too, and I'm like, do you really want me to? No. But I guess that, you know, trends on that show kind of were impactful, but like Jill was saying, it's the small things that mean a lot to the story that maybe the viewer isn't going, wow, it's a feathered earring, but it's a flat on a shoe because she's having trouble walking, that she used to be a model. You know, it's always those small things that tell the story that sometimes the viewer isn't hit with, but for us, it matters the most.
Wonderful. One last question to Jill. Have you ever designed for the live theater? Amelia wants to know. If so, what do you find most difficult about each the design process, live versus pre-filmed work?
I have done a couple of theater projects, and what was different about it is the clothes had to be much sturdier because they're not being worn one time for a scene. They're being worn every performance, sometimes, you know, twice a day on the weekend. And also when you're doing live performance, you need to think about not just who's in the front row, but who's in the back of the theater. And so you're designing, even if they're quiet clothes, a bit of a broader, not flashier, but stronger, you know, color palette, stronger details in order to tell the story of the character to be seen, you know, again, back row as well as kind of up front. So that was important. And then if there were any quick changes, you know, it was very important that the clothes were easy to get in and out of, that the costumers off stage were able to quickly get them in and out of. And so they had to be sturdy, durable, as well as being able to do all the things we've talked about before, which is to help tell the story. So, and, you know, the actor or, you know, singer or whatever has to be able to do their job and not think about the clothes. You know, the clothes can't get in the way of them doing a live performance. You don't want them to trip over a dress, or you don't want them to, you know, have the shoes be too tight and they have to wear it for you know, an hour and a half. So I found it to be quite different in that way. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're going to answer. Hopefully we can get couple questions answered. Everybody has so many questions. Let's see that I have right here. Let's see. All right, we have a question here. Oh, okay, here's a question from Ainsley, and I guess this could go to any of you. Let's take it to Trish. Are you able to work in costume design in other cities, such as New York, or is it best to work in LA?
Well, ladies, like I said earlier, you know, I mean, I have to say, I don't ever pick anything. I don't ever pick a film or a project by where the location is. And unfortunately that puts me in a lot of precarious situations, but I always try and pick a project for the story. And yes, you can work anywhere. I mean, that's kind of the thing we all know now. It doesn't really matter where you live. The film industry has grown and the TV industry has grown so big that, you know, I've worked in Atlanta, South Africa, Budapest, London, all over Canada. I did my first show in LA, which was Mank, which we just finished, which we actually prepped in LA and shot in LA. Wow. And I hadn't done that in, I can't remember the last time that I worked here. Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, you can work anywhere you want. The thing that comes into play a lot of times is unions, because there's different unions in different states. But yeah, you can do what we do and work anywhere. We're gypsies, you know, we just travel where the story takes us. Yeah.
Perfect. Mandi, we have a question from Priscilla Martinez. Are there any good books on costume design that you can recommend?
Okay, this is literally the worst person to ask, because I have this thing that I've said since high school. I was like, I'll be totally honest. I'm not a big reader, which most my teachers at FIDM will probably tell you that. I am a film junkie. I'm a film snob. I literally can't, not that we can go to movie theaters, but I would move from a certain seat if the exit light was too bright. My first two partners were directors. So I'm a big film addict. That's you know, what I do. And I don't think there's a film that I could recommend that you should watch. I think it's, you can DM me. I'll give you a list of films that I love, things that hit me over the head. Literally, like, so books, I really can't recommend you, but I can give you a vegan cooking book. I'm going to
Anybody got a good, Jill, Trish, any recommendations for a good costume book?
Trish?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to have to say I would go to, and I don't know the title of it, but I have it. It's massive. It's History of Costume. And it goes from, it's divided up between every country, different ethnic groups, and goes through the ages. And I think that's a really great book to look through. I would also just get my hands on like a good, I have another book that I love that I won't know the title of it, but it's a book on fabrics, and it gives you descriptions of fabrics and what they can lend themselves best to, like what's a good hand for a dress compared to what's good for a suit. So I would definitely get a good overall book on history of costumes. And then online you can find all these great, which we did on May, these old these reproduction of like little pattern catalogs that literally show you like the dress, and then there's flat patterns inside that you can make. So I think any of those kind of books, like find a good book, a good book on fashion, find a good fabric book that helps explain fabrics to you and what they're used for, and then find some good interesting pattern books, and also an illustration book, like something for drawing, for fashion illustration. And that's a good way to start.
Great advice. I love those books that show I know that I have some costume books that show like, this is a traditional look of 1810. This is a traditional look of 1825. This is a look of 1836. And I'm like, oh. And
regionally, and it changes from where you lived in the world. So
you're right.
Yeah. So I think those are great books to have, because it will also really inspire you, besides giving you the knowledge if you do period. I mean, I use so many. I have so many books, it's insane. I have a little loft upstairs. It's just all books, because that's where I get most of my research from.
Okay, wait.
Andy, what were you going to say?
I want to say something so I don't look like a dummy. Now, I think I got the question mixed up. Like, I don't have any books. Literally, what my computer is on, it is on the collection of the KYOTO Costume Institute, the History of Costume Design, 18th century. But the author, it's that Taschen, Taschen. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
So I think I got the question.
That's
the publisher, right?
Yes.
Okay, but that's what's on the outside. When I say I don't have books, I thought it was like to learn about more what schooling was about as far as fashion and fabric books. I've got plenty of those, and it's literally sitting on it.
It's right under there. Yeah.
I'm not like, I don't read. I thought it was more of like an educational. These are the kind of things that you can, it's more research based too, which I would, which I love.
Don't worry, honey. We are not judging you.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's sitting on it. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The history of costume from 18th century to the 20th century. I have that. It's a prop right now.
I love, let me go back to Jill, because Jill was like, Trish, you want to take this?
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
All right. What now? So I'll go to Jill right now.
I'm going to give you a doozy of a question.
Right.
I'm ready.
Let's give the question, the doozy question to Trish. All right, Jill, you get the last question.
I'm ready.
And this one is from Katie. Can you talk about a costume that was difficult to execute? Not necessarily hard to make, but maybe tricky to figure out and design. What would that be?
I have the perfect. I costume designed a film called Mouse Hunt. And the director, there's a scene where one of the characters is in a factory, and there are all the machinery is going, and he wanted all different parts of his suit to get caught on the machinery, and that the machinery unraveled his suit and his tie and the sleeves of his shirt and his tie. And he didn't want to do it CGI. He says, I want this to be practical. And I remember kind of, my eyes got really big, and I was like, okay, here we go. So I literally went and found fabulous knitter, Judy Graham from Topaz Knitwear, and she worked with me to build a suit made out of knit, a tie made out of knit, shirt sleeves made out of knit, pants made out of knit. The entire outfit was made out of knit, but looked like a real suit. It was just, she did such a brilliant job. And so what we did is I found examples that I would bring to her, and I would say, this is the texture of the suit that I want the suit to look like. Is it possible to get that through knitting with the machines that you have? And so we would go back and forth about what would work. We did samples of it. And then, you know, we had to construct it in a way that, again, he could get in and out of it because it was knit. And then we had to be able to unravel it on camera, hook it up to pieces of the machine that were pulling at it. And literally the entire suit had to unravel on camera in front of you. So that was the hardest, probably one of the hardest I'd ever had to deal with, because not, you know, just because of the mechanics of it.
Wow, I didn't know this question was not a setup. I didn't know that Jill would have a really good answer to this, but thank you, Jill, for having a really good answer.
My pleasure.
Okay. One final question to our esteemed guest. If you were to, and this goes to all of you, if you were to design a costume for somebody who was moderating a discussion on costume design, would it look like this, or not?
I love what you have on.
I think it would look
in a vertical stripe jacket.
Okay, vertical stripe jacket. All right, Trish, how would you costume me?
I think you look great. I mean, red is one of my favorite colors, so I think you look fantastic. You know, we're shooting this here up, and you're perfect. I think it looks great. I think you look fantastic, and it's great with all the costumes behind you.
Mandy?
Well, I love what you've done. I just hope when you walk away, there's a Billy Porter moment going on from the waist down. Top collar, that'll do. But I think you've got the pieces, you're working with it, and I just want to see you walk that runway when you leave.
Okay, all right, perfect. Everybody, please let us give a huge, huge thank you to our esteemed costume designers, Trish Summerville, Mandi Line, and Jill Ohanneson. Thank you, thank you. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I know we probably had hundreds and hundreds of more questions. So honored to have you for storytelling through costume design. So a big thank you to all of you. I can't wait to have cocktails later when we can meet.
Tune in to my Instagram, because I interview costume designers and I have them
yes.
So that's good.
I was just gonna say, everybody please tune in to Mandi Line, hashtag behind the scenes, and your upcoming podcast as well, where you interview fabulous costume designers. I know you've done Ruth Carter. You've done so many costume designers. So everybody please follow Mandi Line on Insta and her Insta Live. And then of course, watch these amazing Apple TV Plus series shows. See Trish Summerville. And then of course, For All Mankind, Jill Ohanneson. Great shows, amazing costumes.